Hello, welcome to demola, and today we are covering the principles of revision. Now, we've gone through tips, techniques that you can use to help with your revision, but I think we're going to get into our psychology bag today, right? We're going to kind of understand about how do our brains work and how can we use that knowledge to help us in terms of improving our revision methods for GCSEs, A-level, medical school, whatever you're doing. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you will agree a lot, and I mean a lot of our revision has to do with memory, especially when we are talking about your A-levels, GCSE, even flipping med school. It's going to be a lot to do with memory. So let's define it. Memory is like this ability to store and then later recall events that have been previously experienced. That's the definition we're going to go with. And it's very much an active process, and that's something that we need to get nailed down straight away. What do I mean by memory is active, right? I mean that it takes effort for your brain, one, to store, and then two, to be able to get that memory and bring it back when you need it, right? And in terms of how we make our memories, and yes, this will link to revision, but how we make our memories is in three main stages. So the first one is encoding. This is when we get the information, we make it into a memory. And our brain does this in three different ways, either by hearing, by seeing, or by attaching a meaning to it, right? If you're linking that to a revision, it depends. Are you a visual learner? Are you more of an audio learner? Do you need to attach something to to the content for you to make sure that you remember it, right? After we've encoded, right, we've formed a memory from the information we got, then we need to decide, are we putting this short-term or long-term memory? And short-term obviously lasts less. Long-term, you're going to be having that memory for a very, very long time. And then after that, we need to talk about retrieval. So retrieval is this process by which we're either recalling or we're recognizing information. So recall is something that, like, without a clue, bam, I've got it, right? When you go through your exams, there are some things that you just need to recall. Whereas other things, maybe you can rely more on recognition, where if you start to see something in the question, you're like, okay, now I'm thinking towards this topic. And I personally think that it's better to kind of rely on both. There are some things, facts, your 1-2 markers in your exams, you need to be able to get that straight away. Whereas in terms of recognition, sometimes you need to be able to spot things in a question that will lead you to start to form thoughts about a specific topic. So both are very important. But in terms of memory, that is how we're going to make a memory in that 3-step process. Okay, so now we're going to get into the multi-store model of memory. And sorry, a bit of PTSD for our Manchester medics out there. We're going to bring it back to semester 3. Glad we're finished with that, if we're finished with that. But yeah, cool. In terms of the multi-store model of memory, there are kind of 3 phases that we have to go through. So the first one being your sensory memory. This is like completely accurate picture of what you've seen, right? Normally lasts for like a fraction of a second. Then it's going to move into the short-term memory. Short-term memory, it's kind of like a buffer phase. It will lead into the long-term memory, which is our last place, but this is more like a buffer. Whereas the long-term memory, limitless capacity, has an unlimited capacity, unlimited duration. This is where we want our information to go, right? Cool. So let's say you're in your classroom, right? You're listening to this teacher speak. As you hear the words that your teacher's saying, that comes into the sensory memory, yeah? If you're paying attention, that can then go to the short-term memory. So we need to pay attention to information to get into the short-term memory. Yes, this can be listening in class. This can be listening to a YouTube video. This can be reading the textbook, right? That's going to go to the short-term memory. But we can very easily lose information from the short-term memory. Very, very easily, right? How are we going to go from short-term to long-term? And this is where we need to focus in rehearsal. Rehearsal is so important into getting our information from short-term to long-term. Now, rehearsal, like, what can we do to rehearse? Well, repeating the notes. So I know some people, after they've done their revision, so they watch a YouTube video, they need to go and write every single thing that they've learned from that video, yeah? If they think that they've learned enough, cool. If not, watch again. That's what I'm saying. So rehearsal can be that. It can be blurting the information if you don't want to write. Practice questions are such a good way of rehearsal, right? And that goes into what we talked about earlier about recall. Can you recall the information without a hint? Cool. If you need to recognize some words, sure. If you read over the notes, can you then apply it into the context? Yeah? So doing practice questions is important. I would also say something that's really important for rehearsal is that thing that you learned back in September is not gonna stick in May unless you've been rehearsing it throughout. Yeah? A very good way to make sure that you keep on replenishing that long-term memory is to do practice along the way. That's what I personally did. So like, say if we did topic 1 in September, by the time we hit November, December, I need to make sure that I've done questions to recap topic 1 so that I can stay in my long-term memory. That means when it comes to May time, I'm not stressed, right? Because I've been repeating it over a couple of months. So that is another really good way of making sure that you've got things stored in that long-term memory, which is where we want to go, yeah? Another thing that I need to mention right now, sleep is so important to consolidating your long-term memory, yeah? There's absolutely no research paper you can read. There's no expert that you listen to that's going to tell you that sleep isn't important. Yeah? To consolidate these memories, you need to sleep. So please, I can only beg with you, that 1 a.m. lock-in is not going to work. Okay? The 1 a.m. lock-in is not going to work. Make sure that you are doing your revision at like appropriate times so that you can get enough sleep. They say 8 hours, please. 8 hours, please, please, please. So yeah, make sure that you are sleeping to consolidate those memories. It's about like brain regions, so like hippocampus, stuff like that, right? We're not gonna go into the biology of it, but those are the main things in terms of rehearsal that will help us to go into our long-term memory. Okay, and now we're gonna switch it up to another model. Like I said, psychology bag today, innit? So we're gonna be talking about our learning pyramid, right? I'll flash up on the screen now. But in terms of the learning pyramid, you will see the ones that are at the top of the pyramid in terms of not gonna remember much, not gonna learn much from it, are lectures, audio, reading, stuff like that. Now, that's not me saying don't go to lectures. That's not me saying don't listen to your teacher. In fact, I do content on the YouTube channel. That's not me saying don't look at my videos. I'm saying that these things are nice, they're supportive, right? But we need to do something that's going to help us in access to that, in advance to that, right? You can see the things that are a bit lower on the pyramid in terms of you're going to be able to learn more from it. It's going to be discussion groups. It's going to be practice by doing. It's going to be teaching others. Let's talk about those 3 because I feel like those are the big 3, right? Now, guys, I'm not saying get your friends around the table and have a discussion about meiosis, yeah? No, that's not going to flip and happen, right? But what I'm saying is that in terms of discussion groups, things that you kind of learn just by talking to your friends, seeing that kind of perspective on things is really, really important. If I throw in an example, the other day in the hospital, me and my friend were talking about treatment for COPD, right? Don't worry about that if you're not a medical student, but we were talking about COPD, and the way that he was like explaining the treatment to me was so helpful. I remember that now. Yeah, I didn't understand it before, but now I remember it. So things like that, by talking to other people, this is really, really helpful in terms of making sure that we're learning things properly, right? The other thing that we talked about was practice by doing. Guys, especially if you're doing like practicals, biology, chemistry, physics practicals, this is really important, yeah? You can literally like remember what you were doing in the moment, and that's going to be helping you in the exam, yeah? So like, if you know you use this piece of equipment, write it in the exam, this is what I'm saying. So practice by doing is another really, really important bit. There are some things as well that like, it might not be practice by doing, but you know like in biology when you have a process, I like drawing it out. So by drawing it out, I'm not doing the process, but I'm like making the process happen, if that makes sense. If I'm waffling, just put it in the comments below. Yeah, I might just be waffling. But literally, by doing things like that, it helps to kind of form the memories because you're like almost creating something. Even with medical school, something that I used to do, they made us learn like all the arteries that link something, and I used to like kind of draw the pathway and label which artery is where, and that kind of helps me with my anatomy to like build a picture and put everything together. So in that way, if it's not practical, you can still practice by doing, if that makes sense. And then the last one, teaching others, cannot stress it enough, right? So in medical school, I do teach like first and second year medical students about like content. That helps it reinforce for me. So like now, if I see a topic that I've covered with the first and second years, I'm gonna remember that a lot better compared to if I wasn't teaching it, because I probably need to understand it if I want to teach someone else. A technique that I think is like really, really underrated, because I know a lot of people will go and like teach their friends or something, or like doing similar courses. Guys, I would grab my mum or my dad, yeah? My mum and my dad, they aren't science people, right? But I would go to them, honestly, God bless them, because it's probably a bit annoying for them. but I would go to them and I would say, Mum, Dad, I want to learn this. Can you just listen to me, like, explain it, right? And the thing is, because they're not like, they don't have like a background in science, right? They would ask me so many random questions that I personally think aren't relevant, but if I can't explain that, then I don't know the topic well enough. And that encourages me to go back into my book, learn it, explain it to them. If you can explain it to somebody who doesn't know science, right, then you know that you're doing something well. So these are like really good methods in terms of consolidating information and getting things down. Okay, well, for the final time today, I'm gonna say psychology bag. So we covered 2 different models today, the learning pyramid and also that multi-store model of memory. A bit of a different type of video, right, from what I normally do, but I guess it's something that I'm a bit passionate about, so I kind of wanted to share that. Hopefully it helps somebody. Hopefully it can kind of help you to like think about the methods of revision that you're using, and then maybe think about how can we make this a bit more of an active process for ourselves. What can we use from these models that's going to help us to move things more into long-term memory in terms of rehearsal? Is that going to be covering something that I learned earlier in the year now so that I can do it again, rehearse the memory, get it into my long-term, and then replenish it so later, so that exam time I remember things, right? It could be that. Learning model, what can I do differently in terms of ideas that are going to get me more to teaching others, to practice by doing, to discussion groups, for example. So hopefully it's been helpful. Any like thing that I could improve on in terms of this style of video, let me know, put them in the comments below. I'm really looking forward to like trying to improve on things like this. So that's been me today. Thank you for listening. If you liked the video, please drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Really, really do appreciate it. Any questions at all, put them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer. We've also got our TikTok and our Instagram, both at demola. Links will be in the description below. But we'll catch you in the next one. Hope that's been useful. Bye for now.